Welcome to the agenda here on the Blood Red channel. I'm Clarke. Welcome along. Liverpool and Raheem Sterling, a complicated relationship through the years, but with the reports suggesting that Man City are considering offloading the 26-year-old should Jurgen Klopp and Michael Edwards consider an Anfield reunion. Kai Delaney is here alongside me. We're going to talk all things Raheem Sterling. And, Kai, despite him starting the Champions League final against Chelsea, there does seem to be a bit of noise around at the moment that Raheem Sterling might be available for a transfer this summer.
Yeah, it's a strange one on the face of it because we've just been looking at the stats and having a little bit of a chat before we started recording, and then he started 28 of 38 games in the league this season, and as you say, still started the Champions League final, so the biggest game in his career and probably Man City's history as well. So it's hardly a situation where he's been outcast and he's not getting a look in. So he's still, a key figure, it seems, under Pep and an instrumental part of this successful Man City team, which has, won countless trophies in the last few years. So, it's a strange one to see these links initially. You're not sure why, from his point of view, he would be looking for a move. Given that he's still playing and still has an important role at the Etihad, but certainly, one to keep an eye on this summer.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's one of those, isn't it? 6 years on from leaving Liverpool, the way in which obviously he kind of engineered that move and it all kind of happened. It seems really bizarre to me that this is a guy who, Man City, in terms of the project they have built ever since that kind of point, he was one of the key cogs in it, wasn't he? He was one of the guys they brought in, a young British player, and albeit, they've been sort of linked, I suppose, with Jack Grealish and Harry Kane now as well, another couple of British players. So maybe they are sort of feeling actually Raheem Sterling, one of the benefits he'd bring is sort of helping fill the homegrown quota thing for European competition. And he's not had the greatest of seasons, but when you think he's 26 now, so he should still be in very much prime years of his career. He's gone through all his development phase. That this season, when you look at it, he still managed to get 10 Premier League goals, and you don't think it was a particularly fantastic season for him. 8 assists alongside it as well. In 28 Premier League starts, he gets 18 goal contributions. You're kind of wondering, surely it's a no starter, but it does feel as though there is something there, given his name's currently at the moment continually getting pushed about.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. If there was to be any substance in these transfers, or if City were perhaps open to letting him go, I think the only reason would be, one, the emergence of Phil Foden, who I think has come on leaps and bounds and perhaps more than anyone expected. I certainly don't think, Foden's now looking like he's probably going to be a starter for England at the Euros, and at the start of the season you would have perhaps said he might make the squad. So that shows just how far he's come. And obviously Foden himself started the Champions League final, and his position predominantly under Guardiola has been out on that left-hand side of the front three. And then you talk about those links with Grealish as well. If you're to have Foden who can play on that side, but that's where Grealish predominantly operates as well, you could see why moving on Sterling for you'd have to imagine 60 million, 70 million, that kind of fee. That would make sense. You could almost pay for certainly a big chunk of Grealish's fee to bring him in, and then you've got two world-class operators there on the left, and you wouldn't want three, you wouldn't have room for three. And would someone like Raheem Sterling then be happy being a second or a third choice, and would he get enough game time to be happy with and satisfy his needs? So the answer is probably not. So if those Grealish links are genuine and Pep does want to bring him in, and you'd imagine he'd be playing an important role for them next season, that's the only way really I could see someone like Sterling being shipped out.
Yeah, I have to say, for me, it sort of really feels like a bit of a non-starter from the off, in terms of certainly the acrimonious nature of his departure from Anfield. The fact that when he's come back to Anfield ever since, obviously City did win there this year, but that was the first time in an awful long time that Man City had even won at Anfield, and obviously no fans there. It does always seem to have been something that's got to him. I'm not sure about you, but it kind of feels that the bridges may be burnt there. But ultimately, we're talking about this and considering it because at the end of the day, Liverpool do need, probably through this summer, do need to be looking at a forward option when you consider Salah's going to be away at the Olympics for the first part of the season. Then he'll go away for the Africa Cup of Nations in the new year, as will Sadio Mane, and a versatile forward who can play, whether it be predominantly out on the left or even in that kind of false nine position like he has done for Man City on a number of occasions. You're kind of looking at it and actually thinking, forget all the baggage, Raheem Sterling would be a brilliant player to be able to try and get your hands on, given a player like, for example, Kylian Mbappe is going to cost far too much money, albeit 60 million would be an awful lot for Liverpool to put down on Raheem Sterling. But he's tried and tested. He knows the course. He knows the club. You kind of think, actually, there are a few boxes that would get ticked, but just one that you can't see Man City weakening themselves in any way to help strengthen, of all clubs, Liverpool.
That's exactly it. I think there are a lot of boxes that would be ticked. I think if he hadn't have joined City from Liverpool, and we know everything that happened with, his interview with BBC and how his agent handled that, and it was dealt with kind of really badly from that side of things, and his relationship with Liverpool fans and the club as well. But say, for example, he'd come through at City, or they'd signed him from Spurs or Chelsea, and then he was potentially available. He would be he'd tick a lot of boxes for Liverpool, as you say, proven and tried and tested in the Premier League. Still only 26 years old. He's become over the last few years one of the best forwards in the Premier League and the most important players for England. Albeit given this season he may have dropped off a little bit, but certainly before that, he'd been just getting better and better and riding this upward trajectory that his career had seemed to be taking. So it would make a lot of sense on the face of it. And you're right to point out there the Africa Cup of Nations this year with Salah and Mane potentially away for 4 to 5 weeks or however long that will be, depending on their success in the tournament. Liverpool going to be left with really Jota and Firmino in terms of genuine attacking threats and people that we don't know what's going to happen with Origi or Shaqiri, the likes of the fringe players this season. Liverpool, in my opinion, do have to sign one more forward, someone maybe of the Jota caliber that we saw last season that could come in for 30-40 million and be someone that can put pressure on that front three, as Jota has done. So in that sense, it does tick a lot of boxes, and it would make sense on the face of it. But for me, I just think that there's too much baggage, too much history there, and I don't think the Liverpool fans I don't think Liverpool fans would be able to kind of get past the way he left the club. And as you say, I don't think City would like to weaken themselves to strengthen who are probably their most serious contenders for the Premier League next season.
I suppose one of those, though, where it would kind of end up being, I suppose, back ball in the court of 6 years ago, the player power of ultimately, if Manchester City don't want to keep him around, it will be down to him to where he goes, because the options will be limited, won't they? I mean, at the moment, Barcelona and Real Madrid seem to get sort of linked with interest with all of these players, but we know they've no money. And if we're just sort of guessing and saying it's going to be £60 million, he left for 50, didn't he, or 49? So it's one of those where you're looking at it and thinking, well, Man City probably will stand to, on transfer fee, make some even a small profit in a COVID market, but are either Barcelona or Real Madrid going to be able to put down those kind of numbers? Don't think so. Arsenal have been linked with him. They're out of European football. You can understand the links with obviously Mikel Arteta being at Arsenal, but surely this is a player, one of England's key players, as you said, a player who over the past few years in the Premier League has been an absolute consistent performer for Manchester City. Surely he can do better than sign for a club who aren't going to be in Europe next season. Do you know what I mean? It feels as though at the end of the day, if Manchester City don't want him, he should, in theory, be free to go to whoever is going to stump up the money.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and if you think of it from his point of view, if City send your surplus to requirements or bringing in £100 million player in your position, you're going to be down the pecking order. If they're trying to get him out, and you're Raheem Sterling, where do you want to go? A move abroad? If you can get to Barcelona or Real Madrid, they have that kind of money. Fantastic. I'm sure he'd be interested. Likewise, PSG, Bayern Munich, any team of that level, I'm sure he'd snap your hand off at a move. But in the Premier League, you'd have to say Liverpool would probably be the first choice for him, if not certainly first or second, behind maybe only maybe a move to Chelsea might interest him. He's a London boy originally coming from QPR and things. Liverpool signed him from there at kind of 14, 15 years old. So you could see maybe Chelsea and their resurgence under Thomas Tuchel, obviously just newly crowned Champions League winners. But Sterling did a Q&A, didn't he, on Instagram? I think it might have been his agent's Colossal Sports Instagram during lockdown about a year ago now, when he was asked about Liverpool, and we covered it. I think we put it up on our social channels, and he said, I still love Liverpool. I always will. That's where I came through, and he still obviously has a great kind of amount of respect and a lot of feelings towards Liverpool. So for him, this Liverpool team, the club is not the club he left. He left a team that was finishing outside the Champions League, and it had really, kind of fallen away from that title challenge that he was such a key part of in 13-14 when he was that part of that trio with Suarez and Sturridge. But when he left City, and a lot of people say, for the money, and you can talk about that and say what you will, but ultimately he said he left for trophies, and he's got a lot of them. He would have had some at Liverpool, if he'd have stayed and been part of this Klopp regime. It's a shame we kind of never got to see that, and I'm sure you can imagine what he would have done under Klopp over the last few years in this Liverpool side. He could have been a key part of that as well. But I'm sure for him, if it was to happen and City do make him available for transfers, Liverpool would be right up there for where he would want to go. But I just don't see City agreeing to that.
No, again, we mentioned it and say that we can't imagine it to be the case. But I just think if we dream for a moment about what the possibility could be if Jurgen Klopp did have Raheem Sterling playing under him, and I think it would be devastating, wouldn't it? I think you think back to that campaign 7 years ago of how he, Suarez and Sturridge just tormented defences with their sheer pace. Now, Man City play a calculated and somewhat slower build-up play at times, but in an electrifying attack like that, the pace he's got to run in behind and the ability he's got even with his finishing, and even how he's adapted his role to play centrally at times as well, I think he would be an ideal fit. It strikes me if this was a player on the continent who hadn't already played at Liverpool before and all of a sudden might have been available, you would be rubbing your hands thinking this is a 26-year-old player who's got international pedigree, who's won trophies galore during his career today, and he's being made available. For me, it seems so surprising that Manchester City would even consider it. But if Liverpool could pull this off, well, it would be sort of, I don't know, surprising yet a masterstroke at the same time in what they would be able to do. But as you said, I think a lot more water would need to pass under the bridge, certainly for the fan base.
Yeah, no, I mean, stranger things have happened. We've seen links with Suarez coming back, and he kind of ultimately forced his way out as well with his actions at the World Cup, and it wasn't quite the same with as I mentioned, Sterling, that the interview he did, and it was a really kind of left a sour taste in the mouth of Liverpool fans the way he did leave the club. But we've seen it with links with Suarez, links with Coutinho, and fans do get excited and almost kind of willing to forget what happened. If a player of his quality is available to come in, and within 6 months, I'm sure if he has a good season and is scoring 15, 20 goals a year and starts winning trophies, then you could see things kind of being forgotten and things moving on. But I think the transfer, as I said, on the face of it, makes a lot of sense, other than the fact that he is Raheem Sterling and what happened 6 years ago. For me, that's the two things that would stop this transfer going through is everything that happened with the move, and the fact that Liverpool are now Manchester City's closest rivals. And I think if we were maybe where Tottenham are or something, then the City would be more open to it. But for me, I don't see Liverpool pursuing it, and even if they did, I don't see City agreeing to it. So
No.
a bit of a non-starter, I think. Although it would make sense, and it would, in terms of his ability, he'd be one of the best around to push that front three for a starting place.
Yeah, to me, it just sort of final point in terms of you mentioning Coutinho and Suarez there as well. For me, of players who Liverpool could return to bring back, it would be the most exciting one to see what what he could do in Jurgen Klopp's system and in Jurgen Klopp's side. But that's it from us here for this edition of The Agenda. Anyway, thanks for joining us here on the Blood Red channel. Do make sure to check out the Blood Red newsletter. The link is, of course, in the description. But from myself, Clarke, and Kai Delaney, thanks for your time and your company. Bye for now.